Good evening and welcome to Real Talk, where every Sunday night we offer insight, education, and resources to in-home caregivers and those that are affected in their world. These are the children, the parents, the extended family, and everyone who loves them. And our goal is to offer real-life topics and learning through discussing real issues and offering real solutions. And tonight I'm very excited to welcome our guest, Tara Dakin-Sauer, who is a licensed licensed marriage and family therapist. You can tell what's on my mind, right? Who has worked to support new parents and their babies in varying capacities for over 15 years. So welcome, Tara. It's really nice to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm definitely excited to be here and talk about this tonight.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So tonight we're going to dig into one aspect of supporting families, supporting babies and their parents. And Tara's going to specifically talk with us about supporting a postpartum parent's mental health. And for those of us who work in this industry, we know that's a critical component. But we have varying degrees of knowledge and varying degrees of experience around those kind of things. And so having an expert to come talk to us about this is something I'm really excited about. Before we kind of dig into that, Tara, I would love it if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background, kind of how you got to this point in your career and how this became a passion.
Yeah, definitely. So I was one of those kids that started as a mother's helper when I was 10, babysat through high school. I figured out when I was 18 that I wanted to be a therapist and really never wavered in that since then. But I knew that was going to be a long game goal. And so I nannied throughout college. And after I graduated, I worked as an infant nanny for a few years. And then I learned what a newborn care specialist was. And I wanted to get the training, partly because I just love learning things. Mm-hmm. But once I learned more about it, I thought, you know what, working overnights could work really well while I'm in school. And so that was kind of how I put myself through my graduate program. And I continued doing that in my residency. And so starting out, it really felt like those were two totally different things, right? You know, I had this job and then I had this vision for my career. But once I started working as a newborn care specialist, before I hadn't had much interaction with parents, right? You say hi in the morning, you say hi when you go home. But now I'm spending lots of time with parents, one-on-one during a very vulnerable time in their lives. And it kind of clicked for me, like, if I'm passionate about, this time of a family's journey, I can help them as a therapist too. And so that's when I decided to pursue training in that and became a certified perinatal mental health professional.
Fantastic. I know that in my exchanges and my opportunities to learn from people who do the kind of work that you do, I've learned a phenomenal amount, mostly learned what I don't know, because I can know a lot about babies. I can know a lot about supporting families, and I can have a caring, compassionate heart. I can be a parent myself, having gone through it, so I can have some empathy. But there's a lot around this topic that we don't know, and people don't always know where to find information. So I'm really excited that you're going to share with us tonight. And I want to talk specifically, kind of dig into how a doula or a newborn care specialist or even an infant nanny can really have a better understanding of this. So I would love for you to talk to us a little bit about new parents and their feelings around these kind of things. What happens? What are they experiencing? What do we need to know?
Yeah. One of the big reasons I wanted to bring this up of how to support a postpartum parent, how to talk to them about mental health, is I think there's a lot of information out there about maybe what not to say or what not to do, but it's a lot harder to find information on, okay, but what should you do, right? And so I will say before I dive into anything, I just want to make the comment that I'll be talking primarily about moms, specifically birthing mothers, because that is who we see and work with the most. But all of this would still apply. So if you're trying to emotionally support a dad or a non-birthing parent, all of this would still be applicable to that.
Okay.
But I think one key thing to know about new moms and their feelings is that the current estimates are that 7 in 10 new moms are either hiding or downplaying their true thoughts and feelings after they bring the baby home. And this is a major reason why perinatal mood and anxiety disorders continue to be underdiagnosed and undertreated, even though it's the most common complication of childbirth. And it means that many women are suffering for months or years before they seek help, because unfortunately, these kinds of disorders typically do not resolve without some kind of professionally guided intervention or treatment.
So could you give us maybe an example? Obviously just kind of pull something out of the air, but give us an example of what that might look like, so that if somebody says, well, what do you mean by they're hiding their feelings? What could that look like?
Yeah. So one of the reasons that moms will hide their feelings is because there's a fear of being judged. There's still a lot of stigma in our society about mental illness. It's better than it was, but it's still there. And it's definitely still there in a lot of families. And so some moms, they've heard of postpartum depression, maybe don't know exactly what it is, but if there's a sense that maybe that's going on, they have a fear that they're going to be labeled as crazy, or even that they're going to get locked up. And so they don't want to reveal anything that might mean that they're ill in that way. Then you also have to factor in all this social pressure, right? Like all these cultural expectations around what motherhood is supposed to look like. It's this joyous, magical time. You're going to love every minute of it. And so if there's a mom who's sitting there not loving every minute of it, she may be afraid that if she admits that, somebody might see her as ungrateful. Or another expectation is that, a good mom always puts her baby's needs first. And so if there's a mom who's feeling trapped or even suffocated by, this little creature that is constantly dependent on her, she could fear that other people might see her as selfish if she mentioned that. And then there's also the idea that, your maternal instincts will kick in right away. Breastfeeding just comes naturally. You're always going to know what to do. And so for a mom who didn't realize how hard it was going to be, she may just feel embarrassed or stupid and doesn't want anyone to know that she didn't know exactly what she was getting into.
Yeah, those are all great points. It's even one of the things I discuss with our students is that a lot of clients who hire newborn care specialists are very talented, very capable, often very powerful people. And it's amazing what a 6 or a 7 pound baby can do to bring them to their knees very, very quickly. And they're often not expecting it. Would something like that play into this?
Oh, absolutely. I think some people maybe expect, I've never struggled with depression or anxiety. I've always been very mentally stable. That's not going to happen to me. But it can happen to anybody. And how severe it is, again, can happen to anybody. So another big fear I see is that people are afraid their baby is going to be taken away. And that's especially true if a mom is experiencing intrusive thoughts about harming her baby, or if she's experiencing postpartum rage. Like those moms are just terrified that somebody's going to find out. They're going to be labeled as unfit to be a mother, and she's going to have her baby and older children. She has other children too, taken away. And that's a really scary thought. You just brought this new little being into the world and you want to take the best care of them. And you don't want to admit that maybe you're not doing the job you thought you would be able to do.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be very, very terrifying. So if someone is in a home as a doula or as a newborn care specialist, that role, how does that help families? And are there any negatives to that as well?
Yeah, I think one way it can definitely help is that you may be spending an extended amount of time with the mom, so you're developing kind of a relationship with her. You're also inside her home, so you're seeing more of her genuine reality, not just the social media version. And hopefully she does view you as an expert. So she knows you've worked with a lot of moms. You're hopefully familiar with what she may be experiencing. So all of that can definitely help her be more honest and trusting of you. But we do need to be sensitive to the fact that some moms may actually feel compelled to hide things because of your role. And one example could be because she's feeling guilty that she isn't doing it all herself. The fact that she either wanted the help or decided she was going to need the help. She could be feeling guilty on all that time with her baby that she's missing each time she hands him over to you to take care of him. A lot of moms may compare themselves to you in the sense that, if this is your job, it's because you love newborns, right? You love working with the brand new, tiniest of humans, and you're choosing to work with this specific age month after month, year after year. And so she may think you just wouldn't get it, or you might even judge her if she does not love the newborn stage and is desperate to get through it as quickly as possible. And then the last reason would be because of the knowledge and skills that you're bringing in, the reason you were hired. Sometimes a baby will respond better to you than to her. And that can absolutely trigger a new mom's insecurities. She sees that and she thinks, see, even the baby can tell I have no idea what I'm doing. And is he ever going to respond that way to me? Does he even love me? And so I just think it's important to know that even if a mom isn't saying anything to indicate this, these are the kinds of things that may be going through a mom's mind.
Yeah, that last point is something that we actually talk about with our students as well, is that we forget sometimes. Babies are our thing. It's what we do. We forget that it's not easy for everyone, and that we have to be very, very careful about how we talk about things, how we approach things, and that we are non-judgmental when we're working with a client, because we don't always know what they're thinking, and they could be thinking those things, and we make it look easy. And I have literally said to a client, yeah, but you're a surgeon. I can't do your job. And I bet you make your job look pretty easy too, because that's what you're really good at. This was not a client who was struggling with this kind of issue, but nevertheless, they were still struggling with a little bit of insecurity. And it can go a long way. So knowing that our role is both one that can be incredibly supportive, but also one that can be intimidating or challenging or cause issues for our clients. How do we talk about these things?
Yeah. I think one main goal is to encourage a mom to see you as safe and to open up to you, because the more that you can do that and she can be honest about how she's really doing, one, you're helping her process through all the changes she's going through, and hopefully that in itself brings a lot of relief. And then two, you're going to be able to identify sooner if she does need a higher level of mental health support or treatment. And we found that early identification and intervention is key in treating these perinatal disorders. And even though your emotional support may not be enough to prevent a disorder from developing, if you're helping her get help sooner, that means her symptoms aren't going to be as severe. They're not going to last as long. And that's huge, because that means she gets to have so much more time where she feels like herself and is the mom that she wants to be for her baby. And I'll also just throw this in there. It is never too early to refer a mom to get help. Even though most women with perinatal mood disorders don't get diagnosed until the postpartum period, over half actually first started showing signs during pregnancy or while they were trying to conceive. So I don't care if it's day 1, day 3, day 12. If you're seeing those signs, you don't have to wait till the baby blues have passed. That may have just already been there. But yeah, so how do you encourage a mom to open up? I think the first thing is just make it normal to talk about her mental well-being. Not just when she's visibly emotional, but anytime. And try to establish that she can talk to you about the really hard and scary stuff. So just putting the subject out there, by talking openly about it, you're modeling that this doesn't need to be a shameful topic, and these aren't things that she needs to feel pressured to keep a secret. So just some examples of things, you can just say, she's nursing, you're sitting next to her on the couch folding the baby laundry, and you just throw something out there, right? a lot of new moms have scary or disturbing thoughts in the first couple of weeks. They're called intrusive thoughts, and sometimes they'll calm down if you just say them out loud. And so I just want you to know I'm here if you'd ever like to share. Or saying, it's perfectly normal to have positive and negative emotions about your connection with your baby, but those mixed feelings can be confusing. And so if you ever want to talk it out, I'm here to listen. Or, again, kind of dispelling those myths of motherhood, right? Hey, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. It is totally a myth that all mothers feel good about being mothers all the time. So I'm curious, how have you been feeling about being a mom today? Just kind of put that out there. Or maybe you're asking questions. And if you're doing that, you want to be direct and specific. Don't ask just how are you feeling. It's so ingrained to respond, I'm good, whether that's true or not. But, if out of habit you do ask that and the mom responds, yeah, I'm good, or more likely like, I'm okay, just tired. You can always follow that up and ask, how are you really doing? I'm here if you want to talk about how you're feeling. Again, be specific. So rather than asking, how have you been sleeping? Ask, how long does it typically take you to fall asleep? Does your sleep feel restless? Do you wake up often? Instead of, how are you doing emotionally? You could ask, have you had any emotional reactions recently that were concerning to you? And if you do suspect that a mom may be experiencing a mood disorder, definitely don't hesitate to ask about the really scary stuff. A lot of people worry that if you ask about suicidal or homicidal ideation and she isn't already having those kinds of thoughts, then you're putting the idea in her head. But that just isn't true. By asking whether she's having those thoughts or not, you're giving her permission to talk about it now or in the future. Mm-hmm. So just ask. Have you had any thoughts about wanting to harm yourself or wanting to end your life? Have you thought at all about harming your baby in any way? Mm-hmm. Just ask it the same tone that you would ask any other question, right? It's not, oh, have you thought about this? No, it's just a question like any other. Right. It's just as safe to talk about.
Right. So I had somebody say to me once in a training that I was in that sometimes if you're asking questions, because we ask a lot of questions about the physical, right? How's your bleeding doing? Or how is breastfeeding going? Is it, is there any pain? Do we need to maybe take a look at the latch, etc.? That to just kind of include those kind of questions as part of that same conversation, because it normalizes it. Is that accurate, or is there a better way to do that?
Yeah, I would say that's great. It's kind of like you're sprinkling it in, right? So it doesn't feel like it's this separate thing. If you're working on breastfeeding the latch, you can just throw out there, a lot of moms have mixed feelings about breastfeeding, and I'm here if you ever want to kind of talk some of that out. So yeah, it's just throw it in there whenever it makes sense.
Right. And is there ever a time when kind of normalizing this, so to speak, isn't helpful? And is there a better way to handle it, if that's true?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we can do in encouraging a mom to open up is first to just be a good listener, to be attentive and non-judgmental. Once she does get into talking about something, that's when we want to try to avoid using questions to keep the conversation going, because that could make her feel interrogated, which can kind of bring up a sense of having done something wrong. And if you're asking a lot of questions, that means you're leading the direction of the conversation. And we want to make sure the mom is able to talk about whatever she feels is important, not just what we want to know or think we should be asking about. So instead of questions, you can keep the conversation going using reflective statements where you're not making any kind of interpretation or judgment. You're just summarizing what you just heard. I'm hearing that you're feeling really guilty that we had to supplement with formula the last couple of nights. And you just pause, wait for her to, keep going and say more. Or you can use general empathetic statements of, yeah, that sounds tough, or I'm sorry today was so hard. And then again, you can use normalizing statements. Those can be, very helpful because they let a person know they aren't alone in their experience, that what they're going through is common, it's reasonable, and it can help make something that at first might be scary or wrong feel more acceptable. But there are some times that I don't think normalizing is the best way to respond. The two problems that I have with normalizing, the first is when we misuse the word normal, and what we really mean is common. Because many of the thoughts and feelings that new moms have in the postpartum period, especially those first 2 to 3 weeks, they are very common, but they aren't normal. They're reasonable and acceptable temporarily, considering the context. But the goal is that in time, things will return to normal and she won't continue to have these thoughts and feelings. And I've seen so many moms that they've shared something about how they were feeling and they were told by their mom or their friend or even their doctor, oh yeah, that's normal. It's just the baby blues. Or, oh, you just had a baby, all those hormones, like it's normal to feel this way. And so these moms end up thinking that this is just what being a mother feels like. And so I mentioned earlier the fear that can play into moms not asking for help, but this is actually the number one reason I have seen for why moms suffer so long before finally getting help. They think that what they're feeling is just par for the course with motherhood and they just have to get used to it. So I recommend avoiding using the word normal unless you're talking about something that really is normal, meaning it's, it's standard, regular. There would be no cause for concern even if it never changes. That means it's normal. And if what you really mean is something is common, then acknowledge what's common about it and at what point would it maybe not be so common anymore, right? So, it's pretty common to feel a huge range of emotions, sometimes flipping quickly one to another during those first couple weeks. But let's keep an eye on this. If you're still having mood swings or you're still concerned about that irritability in a week or so, you may want to call your doctor and check in. So just kind of putting that out there. But again, right now, this is super common. But a little while from now, this could be a cause for concern. And so we just want to make that distinction so moms don't think that this is always normal and maybe it'll get a little less intense, but you better get used to it because this is just what the road entails.
Right. No, I love that you made that distinction because I'm guilty of having done that myself. And not even thinking about it. And it's challenging me to think very differently. And I think the message maybe there is really think about what you're saying and ensure that you're saying the right thing. Because what I heard in those statements was somebody ultimately it sounds like their goal was to reassure, right? And we tend to want to fix things anyway. That's our nature many times. And of course, caregivers, when we're caregivers by nature, we want to fix everything and make it all better. But if I'm hearing you right, just reassuring them isn't always a good thing.
Yes, that can be true. Because as you mentioned, I think our instinct is to, comfort, especially if a mom is sharing disappointments or insecurities, we want to give her that encouragement, that reassurance. But the problem is there's this thing called toxic positivity. And that's all those nice things we say to people that we're really hoping will make them feel better. But that actually makes them feel worse because it denies or minimizes the fact that negativity is a legitimate part of the full, authentic human range of emotion. And so if a mom is sharing something negative, we want to welcome that and validate that. We want to allow space for things to be not good and not feel that rush to jump in, fix it, or rescue her from this emotion. And so one recommendation I have for avoiding falling into that is just a slight shift in your mindset. Instead of thinking that your goal is to make her feel better, your goal is to make her feel heard and understood. That will make her feel better. But if you frame that as your goal, you're less likely to fall into making the kinds of statements that all you're trying to do is make her feel better. And the other way that you can avoid that toxic positivity trap is by taking what's called a yes and perspective. So when we experience contrasting emotions, that can be really difficult to reconcile because our brains prefer either or categories. Something can't be good and bad because that would be messy. But the reality is that motherhood is messy and full of contradictory feelings. And so oftentimes if a mom is experiencing feelings that don't seem to go together and most everyone around her is pushing the positive, she's going to dig her heels into the negative feelings and focus only on those because that's what she desperately wants someone to see and acknowledge. Unfortunately, the more negative she seems, the more positive that the people around her feel like they need to be in order to kind of move her to the middle. But that is that toxic positivity trap of shutting the door on negative feelings doesn't make them go away, it makes them worse. And so if we see a mom who we can tell her perspective is all negative, and we know that that's not really a fair assessment of what's going on, but also knowing that our temptation will be to respond by turning everything positive, which is also rarely an accurate assessment, and she's not going to buy it, right? So our goal is to respond in a way that balances the positive and the negative. You validate how she feels, and then you affirm whatever really is true about the negative. You remind her of the positive she may be dismissing in a way that's believable. So an example could look like, you come in for your shift and you're standing at the kitchen island, you're reviewing the log from the day, and it was a rough day. And after talking through everything that went wrong, she starts crying and, she says like, oh my gosh, I'm a mess. I have no idea what I'm doing. It feels like I'm never going to figure out how to do this mom thing. Like I suck at this. A more positive, only positive, reassuring response would sound like, oh my gosh, no, you're not a mess. Like you are a great mom. You're doing fine. The problem with that is she is a mess. She hasn't showered in 2 days. She has spit up on her. Snot is now starting to come down her nose. And so anything you say after telling her she's not a mess, she's going to interpret as you're just lying to make her feel better. And so a more balanced response, so again, that yes and would be to, kind of look her up and down and smile and say, well, yeah, you kind of are a mess. And you're a good mom. You can be both. You can feel like you have no idea what you're doing and be doing a great job.
Yeah, it seems so simple. And yet it's something that we would have to really consciously think about to do. But the message is so much more genuine. Yeah, that's huge in terms of thinking about that. And I would say, at least for me and people watching this, if that was the only thing they took away from this whole conversation, it would be like, yeah, that's it. And I've been taught in other classes the yes and, because I've been taught that to how to deal with people who maybe are disagreeing with you when you're teaching a class live, etc. But this puts it in a whole different light. So I'm like feeling like, wow, I got a new tool. That's awesome.
Some other common examples of those contrasting emotions that moms will have is, so you can love your baby and think the job of parenting sucks sometimes. Or you can love being a mom and miss the old you and your life before the baby. You can be grateful that your baby's healthy and that you're recovering well and feel disappointed or sad or even angry about your birth experience. So those are some of the really common ones I see that moms, they don't think they can put those together, but they can.
Yeah. And that one resonates with me because my oldest child is partially disabled. And we had a very, very difficult birth experience. And everybody said to me, well, you should just be grateful he's alive. You should just be grateful that he's not brain damaged. And it was like,
I'm sure you were grateful about that.
Yeah, you bet I was.
And you were upset about the experience.
Exactly. So that one resonates really strongly with me. And I'm sure for a lot of people who see this, really in just a short amount of time, I feel like I personally heck with everybody else. I'm walking away with new tools. But you've shared a ton of really great information. And we're almost out of time. Is there anything else that you would love to share with our audience? A final takeaway, or if you could say, if you don't remember anything else, this.
Yeah, I think maybe one last tip that I could impart, I hear a lot of people feel a little bit uncomfortable about how to say, like, I think you need help, right? It's a very sensitive thing to bring up. And how can you do that in a way that's very respectful, but make sure that she really is getting the help that she needs? And so what I recommend is, rather than focusing on, what are her symptoms? Does she check off this list? How severe are her symptoms? You really want to focus on how she's feeling about whatever she's experiencing and how much it's impacting her day to day. So you ask questions like, how much is this bothering you? On a scale of 0 to 10, 0 is not at all. 10 is, I can't stand feeling this way. How much is this impacting your ability to care for yourself, for your baby? And 0, yes, this symptom, this thing is there, but I can still do everything. And 10 is, I'm totally incapable of doing the things I need to do. And so when you ask questions like this, then when it's time to say that she needs to get help, you don't have to say, oh, well, I'm seeing this, this, and this. And so that means it's probably not the baby blues. And, you should probably go see your doctor. You're basing the recommendation on how she told you she's feeling. So you can say something like, wow, it sounds like these intrusive thoughts are really upsetting you. And I definitely don't want you to have to keep suffering like this. And so what would you think about calling your doctor tomorrow and making an appointment to learn what could help you start feeling better? Or you could say, I'm so sorry to hear how much these fears about leaving the house are getting in the way of doing all the things you want to do with little Joey. Would you like some names of therapists who specialize in working with postpartum moms? You can reach out to them and ask if maybe therapy could help you start feeling more confident about doing those things. So it's less about you making a judgment of, this doesn't look right, but you told me that this is bothering you, that you're not getting to be the mom that you want to be. And that's why I'm encouraging you to get help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great way to approach it for sure. I'm like really just dumbfounded at how in such a short amount of time you can glean so much information. And I know that we're probably going to have a lot of questions around this, but thank you so much for sharing and joining us. It really has been an honor to have you here and share with us, Tara, and to learn with you and to give some really concrete takeaways. Because a lot of times when we talk around things that are maybe unfamiliar to us, or when we talk about mental health, a lot of times it's always kind of a more esoteric thing. And having concrete takeaways is huge. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad that I could share this, and I just hope it's helpful for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And to our audience, thank you for joining us tonight. If you have questions around this topic or anything related to working with maybe a therapist in helping a client or learning more, anything around this entire topic, please put them in the feed and tag Tara or tag Newborn Care Solutions, and we'll make sure that you get answers. If you watch this on replay and you want to catch this or any of our other segments, you can find them on newborncaresolutions.com. Click on the education tab or on our YouTube channel. All you have to do is search Real Talk Newborn Care Solutions and they will all come up. So thank you for joining us tonight and have a fantastic evening.